Hello, the name is BrianTheBrain, and every time I go online and search up FarCry, a lot of the time, when it isn't results about people overpraising Far Cry 3, or people deciding who is the best or worst hero in the franchise, it's people beating on Far Cry 2 like a tire pinata. It was about 4 years ago when I first got into the series myself, and after hearing people talk about how good the franchise is, specifically with Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 5, and getting all of the games on Steam to play through all of them, starting with the first game of course. Going into them, I was wondering what my views on each game would be, and after having finished the Seinfeld-inspired comedy that is Far Cry 1, I went head first into Far Cry 2, and having finished it, I loved it. I thought and still do think that it's one of the best games I have ever played. Everything down to the realistic yet stylized look and atmosphere, the extra effort developers put into fine crafting every small detail, such as fire spreading like actual wildfire, how fun the general gameplay loop was, and from how funny Kouassi is.
This is the APR, greatest faction in the land. You're lucky to be here with us, better than with those old ladies in the United Front.
The game took about a day's worth of playtime to beat for me on the hard difficulty, and after having been blown away by how good the game was, I was so eager to see what people thought about the game, so I went online and saw that finally something positive. I hope that means there's more. I was shocked from seeing just how much disdain there was towards this game, after having spent a good time on it myself. Everything from hateful posts about the game on Reddit to detailed videos on why a certain person hates the game, with even more hateful comments about it in those videos as comment sections, to people even forming cults on why Far Cry 2 is the return of Satan himself. It was all so surprising to see as someone who had just got into the series at the time. All the while, those very same people, as well as those cult members, sing their praises on why Far Cry 3 is so good, and why it's the best in the series. I was unsure on how to tackle the series after seeing people's views on Far Cry 2, whether or not those people are right in saying Far Cry 2 is actually the bad one, with the later games being better. With this knowledge in my brain, I went forth with a more observant mindset when playing through Far Cry 3. It was overall anticipating a better game than the one I had played just before, and that anticipation led to mild disappointment. I didn't like Far Cry 3 nearly as much as Far Cry 2, let alone as much as some people in the fanbase. I still think it's an alright game. It has some cool elements, such as the gunplay, with there being more options to choose from Far Cry 2, the fact that there were more combat options in general, such as the inclusion of sneak attacks and drop from above kills, and the upgrade system, which enables some of the new combat options, and does other things, such as increase your health and make you overall more efficient in battle. But I couldn't really help but feel like most of these things were unnecessary. Still cool, but unnecessary. Like, did there really need to be an upgrade quote-unquote for being able to sprint slide? You can already do that in Far Cry 2, no upgrade required, and the game doesn't even have any sort of skill tree. The moves you have in Far Cry 2 at the start are also the moves you have at the end of the game as well, and will carry you throughout your entire experience. There's also upgrades that let you increase your health bar to up to 6 bars in Far Cry 3, as you only start off with just 3 at the start, where you start and end with 5 and 2. I also really didn't enjoy using the crafting system. Like, why do I have to go around the map looking for green plants just to be able to craft syringes? You can find syringes just fine in outposts in 2, and there's always enough to spare, and you get them while indulging in the main gameplay. You're also able to craft stuff like holsters that increase the amount of guns you're able to carry to 4, as you can only hold just 1 gun at the start of the game. Again, in comparing Far Cry 2, you're able to hold 3 guns, those being a primary, a secondary, a special weapon, and your machete. That's 4 weapons that you can carry at the start of the game. I didn't really mind when I would be able to find these things while playing through the main story, but most of the time, I had to go out of my way to find specific spots where the animal I need to kill was in order to craft a rack sack or whatever, which are tedious to look for, even with help from the towers and guides online, and there's only so many that spawn at a time, so I would have to go to multiple at once when I was further into the game. I also didn't really like the new outpost system that the games Onward would use, where they're now used more so as just general safe houses where you can restock ammo, fast travel to all of the outposts you liberated, and buy weapons after liberating them, as I preferred when there were dedicated shops for weapons and ammo, and dedicated fast travel spots in the form of the bus, as it really helped immerse me in the world of Far Cry 2. Immersion is not exactly in Far Cry 3's dictionary, as whenever I finished a mission, I would usually just go into the pause menu and fast travel to the outpost that was closest to the mission, as well as the pretty stupid AI in the game that can't see you in the bush even if you're only like 20 feet away. The AI was actually pretty smart in Far Cry 2, where they were able to deploy flanking maneuvers and hone in on your last known location, and pick up their down if they had the opportunity to help them. All in all, I found Far Cry 3 to be a lot more tedious and arduous than Far Cry 2, which is literally the exact opposite of the usual Far Cry 2 vs Far Cry 3 comparisons. And just like when I first saw people's opinions on 2, I was shocked by that personal revelation, and didn't really know how I'd be able to look a Far Cry fan in the face after thinking so. I still like the game enough. I don't hate it, I have my fun with it, but I personally still consider 2 to be a far superior game. After beating 3, I then played through pretty much the rest of the series, with Far Cry 3 being my favorite out of the post Far Cry 3 games. Because in Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, you were able to literally tame these Cyberpunk 2077 looking ass dragons, the Blood Dragons, and use them to wipe out pretty much an entire outpost. And if that isn't cool as hell, then I don't think anything else can be. I also liked a good amount of Far Cry 5. It was one of the only times where I felt like I agreed with the community when I played that game. It's still not as good as people say it is in my opinion, but I still found it to be fun, and actually better than 3. Playing that all aside though, after having played through the entire series and finding masterpiece material in Far Cry 2, I wish to also sing my praises like people do with Far Cry 3 in the community, and talk about why I personally think it's the best in the series. In doing so, it's of course important to provide some context before I fully delve into how good Far Cry 2 is. Far Cry as a series began in 2004, with the first game in the series being made by Crytek, the same people who would go on to make the Crysis series, and it really shows because this funny little game feels like a predecessor to Crysis 1, so much so in fact that it feels like the true Crysis 1, with Crysis 1 being Crysis 2. The game was originally a tech demo called Dinosaur Island, which was released in 1999, with the purpose of showing how their new game engine technology was much better at showing larger distances than other contemporary game engines at the time. And they showed it off in the video, where Dinosaur Island would be distributed as benchmarking software for NVIDIA GPUs at the time. In an unspecified amount of time later, Ubisoft approached Crytek on making Dinosaur Island into a full-on game published by them, and after 4 years of development, we would get the game that started it all, Far Cry 1. Thank you, Far Cry 1, for blowing out my eardrums. Also, before I talk more about Far Cry 1, I found out that apparently the German police performed a morning raid on Crytek in February 2004 because they were claimed to have been using software illegally. And I just find that really funny, I don't know why. Like, imagine how that went. This game was basically the Crysis of 2004 when it came to seeing how computers at the time were able to run it. You can just imagine your old GeForce 3 Ti catching on fire while trying to play this at high settings. It was a technical marvel, much like it's at this point 5 years old tech demo. And just like Dinosaur Island, Far Cry 1 was still mostly just a tech demo, though that doesn't mean they didn't try to add something new to the industry besides just better graphics. Oh no, quite the contrary. Far Cry 1 is also known as the game that helped shape the stealth-based tactical first-person shooter with open-ended environments that would not only be seen in the games in the future, but also pretty much in the rest of the series as well. Far Cry 1 had open-ended levels, while still having a main objective to each. There's always just one end to reach, but how you go about getting to that goal is all up to you. You either take the long, scenic route, or go all guns and blazing and kill everyone your way, and you take the short route. Don't actually do that though, this game gets really fucking hard later on. The story is pretty straightforward. You're just a normal mercenary dude that is tasked with finding out what the hell is going on some island in Micronesia. And you find out that shit like this is going on, so you gotta stop the big bad scientists propagating all of this before things get out of hand. Where it's then topped off by being betrayed by your closest ally since getting onto the island, Doyle, who tells you what you need to do next and helps you find your objectives. I always knew Doyle was up to no good. His name literally sounds like toilet. Of course he was gonna pull something eventually. The game is pretty fun, but above all, it's pretty funny. I like this game a lot. I think it's underrated and deserves more attention, but there's definitely some problems I have with it that I want to talk about, but that's for another time, because now, we're finally going to be talking about the funny Far Cry 2. In doing so, it's most important to talk about how we got to this game in the first place. After the release of Far Cry 1, Crytek would give us the series to Ubisoft entirely, where they would make 2 games based off the first one's world, in the forms of Far Cry Instincts and Far Cry Instincts Evolution, with Far Cry Instincts being basically a quote-unquote remake that's more like a remake of the original game, with certain aspects of the plot changed around a bit, and Far Cry Instinct's Evolution being basically a continuation of the Instincts version of the game, not the original made by Crytek. I know it's confusing, but basically they're just spin-offs of the original game. There was also a port of Instinct's Evolution for the Wii called Far Cry Vengeance, but I tried to pretend that game doesn't exist so I don't have 480p 15 FPS nightmares.
What the hell is this?
While those were being made, Ubisoft was thinking about how would they go about making an actual Far Cry 2, and to accompany the game, they were making an engine for it called Dunia, which is a heavily modified version of Crytek's CryEngine 1. In July 2007, the game would be officially announced, showcasing a much more serious and grittier game than the ones before it, and in October 21st, 2008, the game was released to actually positive reviews, which I wasn't expecting at all given what people think of the game nowadays. Also, apparently there's a mobile version of the game that looks like... shit, yeah, it looks like shit. Now that we're finally actually talking about the game for real this time, it's about time I talk about just what this game is all about. Basically, you're a mercenary sent to Africa. Where in Africa? Who knows, and this game doesn't seem to care since it doesn't tell you, but when you arrive, you're transported by a cab driver who gives you a brief lowdown on the current situation in the country, telling you that foreigners take everything from the natives and leave nothing for them. That kind of sounds like a certain country that also did that same thing in Africa in real life, and I can't help but put my finger on what country that is. Anyways, at the end of the cab tribe, you're taken to the only hotel in Pala, the main city in the first map. Yes, there are other maps, I'll eventually get to that. Where your character, who can be whoever you want it to be at the start of the game, but I always pick Marty, since he's in pretty much all of the promotional material for the game, contracts malaria, and passes out while still in the cab. A few seconds later, we see a man who is looking through our briefcase, the rude bastard, and he is revealed to be the Jackal that we're supposed to kill, but since our character has a skill issue, the Jackal runs off, but not before leaving behind his machete and pistol. It's almost like we're foreshadowing something. We're left on our own, and we go outside, where a bunch of people are playing Call of Duty, and you're thrown into the mix. Whatever shall we do? Thankfully, you're supposed to lose here, and after being knocked out, you're taken by a mysterious man somewhere, who is revealed to go by the name of Anto Kankaras, if you were in a loading screen later on in the game that is, and he tells us that he and his team went into Pala and brought you back to their hideout, and now you're going to beat their bitch. And he tells you how he wants you to clear out a certain safe house. And once you get there, you're told to go to Sleep, because Sleep is Marty's middle name. And you're then tasked to go to an outpost to save a hostage, and when you free them, you're told by them to stop by Mike's bar, where you're introduced to the gun shop and some other characters, with one in particular going by the name of Ruben. Ruben is a journalist covering the war in the country, and the centerpiece of his work is the Jackal, where he talks about how the Jackal mongered every war he's covered in the past, including the current one, and he tells you to stop by the church in Pala, where we're introduced to the medicine in the game that will help fight off that pesky malaria, where it's shown to be...
Hi, Phil Swift here for Flex Tape, the super strong
malaria
new tape.
Nah, that would make too much sense. Instead, it's just boring pills. After doing all of that, this is where we're told that the tutorial is finally over, and now we can choose which faction we want to support. Either the UFLL, which stands for United Front for Liberation and Labor, or the APR, which stands for Alliance for Popular Resistance. It doesn't really matter who you go to, the only thing that changes is what missions you do. That's one of the elements I like about Far Cry 2 the most. Just like Far Cry 1, you have an end goal you strive for, but you can choose how you go about it, and Far Cry 2 basically takes what Far Cry 1 did in its formula and massively improves upon it. The point is that neither the UFLL or the APR are good, but you don't necessarily have a choice to do neither. Your main goal is still to find the Jackal and kill him, and helping the UFLL and APR will assist you in doing just that. This game is the epitome of the world doesn't revolve around you, and is constantly trying to kick you while you're down, which is something you see much more of later on in the game. In saying that, we move on from the church, and get to pick between the two factions to do missions for. I picked the UFLL since Anto was also from the UFLL, and it just made the most sense considering that. Though looking back retrospectively, I probably should have gone with the APR since Prosper Kouassi is epic. From there on out, you do a series of missions for the UFLL, and with each mission, you get the choice to do a different version of that mission, offered by one of your buddies. And these missions usually take longer than the main one, but to compensate, you get more reputation for completing them. But reputation only really affects how the people in the towns you go to view you, either as the idiot loserhead, or as someone that even Heavy from Team Fortress 2 fears. First mission sees us having to tag gold from a used to be king, and we go and do exactly that. This would be a good time to talk about a point of contention with this game, which would be the driving. Lots of people talk about how boring it is, and how most of the entire game is just you going from point A to point B in your shitty Jeep, and also how it's the only way of getting from that point A to B. Now, personally, I actually like the driving controls. They feel realistic, yet snappy at the same time, and they're always fun to use. This is definitely down to personal preference, but in my opinion, the fact that I have to drive everywhere to get to where I need to go is a great metaphor that this game applies, which is that you have to do a bunch of different stuff for factions that you know are bad, but you still need to do that stuff so you can kill the Jackal. Plus, if you really want to minimize the amount of travel you're going to be doing, you can always just use fast travel, which I find is usually near where you need to go next anyways, so it's not really a problem for me. When you're driving to a mission, chances are you're going to encounter an outpost, maybe even multiple, and these also help ensure that the driving doesn't get stale, at least for me. It adds variety to the game, as how you tackle each outpost is, of course, entirely up to you. You can either go in guns blazing with your amateurish stolen weapons loadout that consists of a shitty G3 KA4 and a normal Makarov, or, when you're later in the game, get a sniper, preferably the AS-50 as it's the best one, as snipers are busted in this game. A silent Makarov and an RPG, gunplay in general is very reliant on you being able to pick off enemies one by one, as if you alert them too quickly and too openly, you'll be turned to Swiss cheese in a second flat, or be flanked by multiple enemies from all sides. But either way, you're fucked, so it's important that you keep a low profile and crouch near your outposts a lot. This is also why I said snipers are OP, since you can stay far away from enemies while you pick them off one by one, and they're usually too far away to even notice you, and if they do, they won't really be able to hit you. You can basically Modern Warfare 2 MLG on everyone with no problem. With the knowledge of gunplay out of the way, after going through multiple outposts, I decided to do the buddy version of the mission, where I first had to assassinate the king that was previously mentioned by Gokuma in the briefing, and take his ring, and after some more outposts, we're at the building where the king is, and after killing everyone, he gives us some trouble that no one cares about, and we kill his ass. And we head back to where our buddy was when he briefed us, where the son of the king asked for the ring. I guess your son doesn't love you that much, huh?
I have a son. That's right. If you kill me, he will avenge me. He loves me. You have no idea how much this means to me.
Nope, no he doesn't. Now we do the main part of the mission that we were supposed to do before, and we do this with our buddy. This would also be a good time to talk about how the buddy system works. Basically, you sometimes have a buddy help you fend off enemies, and if you have buddies available and you die, you can be revived by your buddy and live to fight another day. Okay, just hooked the hood and now I'm good to— What? Oh, what the fuck? I had no way of seeing that. But at least she's helping me out. Your buddies can die too though. If they die, they're permanently dead, so you gotta do your best to help them out like how they're helping you out. In this mission, Joseph was helping me out, and once I tagged the gold, we were ambushed, with Joseph being down almost instantly, and I was left alone to kill everyone. I was also nagged at by Joseph to save him. Bro, I'm trying my best to help you out, man, calm down. I'm just one guy. After I killed off everyone else, I went to Joseph and gave him my last syringe, and we both went our separate ways. After getting back to Paula, it really doesn't matter which missions you do now. You just do missions for the UFLL or APR after a while, and eventually you'll be able to do missions for the gun shops, and these special missions unlock new guns you can buy at the shop. These are very important, as after doing all of them, you're able to buy the AS-50, which you get a taste of if you did the buddy version of the mission we just talked about. And like I said before, that's the best sniper rifle in the game, so it's important that you do these missions if you want to maximize your potential. After a while of going through the same general gameplay loop, if you were doing missions for the UFLL, you will sadly be tasked with the killing of the leader of the APR, Prosper Kouassi. And when you're done killing either Kouassi or Gokuma, it seems like that, uh-oh, you were set up. you will be ambushed, you having to escape by going to Goka Falls, where you get a call from Ruben, where he then tells you to meet up with him at the lumber mill outside of Pala. Ruben tells us about the huge offensive in Weibo Sako, caused by our actions, and the targets of that offensive are us and our buddies, since we're all foreign mercenaries and have been called traitors and spies by the UFLL. And all of the troops go to Mike's bar to rid of us. Ruben also tells us that at the same time, the troops have been killing civilians, and if we don't make it to the church in time, everyone in there will surely be killed. Where's Jesus when you need him? Regardless of what you choose, you'll be overwhelmed and gunned down, and you'll find yourself in the back of a truck that's going to a mass grave in the desert, where you roll off and try to find shelter. And once you wake up, we're now at our second encounter with the Jackal, and this time, he's tending to our wounds like a good little lad. And he basically just tells us about how shitty the UFLL and APR are, and that to truly stop them, they must be completely destroyed. The Jackal disappears once again, just like that one guy in that one meme, and we're found by Nick Greaves, who is surprised that we're still alive, and he talks about how the UFLL is retreating south to the second map of the game, and that since we're at his mercy, we have to go and kill the other faction's leader, and to meet him at Cephapane when we're done. After another assassination, we make our way to Cephapane, where Nick gives us a rundown on a false flag operation that he wants us to do to help refuel the conflict. Us and our new buddy are sent on a mission to meet up on an island, where we had to escort weapons that the Jackal hid away in Port Salau, and since it's covered in the markings of the rival factions, this quickly reignites the conflict, and we're back to shooting baddies in the face. We meet up with our new buddy on the barge, and we're tasked with destroying enemy boats so they don't get a hold of the weapons, and when we reach the port, our buddy warns the doctor about the upcoming bloodshed, when we're dead told to leave through the back, since it's made clear to us that the ceasefire was broken, and now everyone is playing Call of Duty. We get a call by our buddy to help him fend off an ambush, and once we do all of that, we're free to do whatever we want once again, and do another series of missions, taking out outposts along the way, and eventually, we're told by our faction to retrieve a case of diamonds from the other faction leader, where our buddy also tells us that instead of taking the diamonds back to our boss, we take the diamonds to an airport and leave together, since the war ending could mean that we're both goners. When we get to where the suitcase is, we see a bunch of dead bodies all along the area, and we walk into the room, where we see that the faction leader is already dead. We go to get the briefcase, but after doing that, we're kicked down by the Jackal, and he tells us about how he wants the war to continue so that the factions won't be able to kill innocent people without being seen by everyone. He knocks us out, and we're taken to a slave outpost, where we break out and escape. We get a call from Nick, and he tells us that we have to go and kill the other faction leader to make his faction stronger, and we're also told to meet him over at the Mosate Salal office after we're done. When we kill the other faction leader, we see Walton Purefoy, who tells us that we have to go to Topoko to kill Nick and Arturo, so he can become the leader. You go do that, and after the mission is done, we get another call from Ruben, who tells us to meet him at the marina, but to tread carefully since Walton is there. Before you go to talk to him, Ruben tells you that him and the other journalists may be under trouble. After that call, we're called over by Walton, and we kill him as well. Once that is all said and done, Ruben calls us to tell us to come to the airfield, as he and the other journalists are being attacked, and after saving them, Ruben tells you to go to the prison, since there will be a riot there, and the Jackal will also be there. When we get to the prison, we start working alongside the Jackal, who has changed his mind and wants the war to end. Took him a while, huh? He tells you to go past the prison, and has two requests for you, one of them being to retrieve diamonds from Crash Landing, and the other is to kill the two lieutenants that are still alive in the Jungle Bavalk. When we get to find the case of diamonds, we are met with all of our buddies we met along the way, and they want the diamonds to get out of the country. They know you want it for different purposes, and we're forced to fight to the death for them. Damn it, I knew I never should have trusted them. At the Jungle Bavalk, the two factions have united, and there are a whole lot of mercenaries. And while the two leaders are talking, we go in and kill them, and we meet up with the Jackal again at his hut. And he tells us about how the diamonds are needed to bribe the border guards to allow refugees to escape. One of us, either the Jackal or us, had to give the diamonds to the border guards, but had to commit suicide since we have no place in normal society. No matter which you pick, you die, and you allow 2 million refugees to escape the country, redeeming all of the bad actions you have done. It's presumed that the Jack was also killed, but his body was never found. I wonder if he was playing us the whole time. Either way, we're told that sadly, the country remains war-torn, and no one listens to Ruben's story, but he continues to publish it on his personal blog despite that. And with that, we have reached the end of the game. If there was one term I can use to describe this game, it would be a roller coaster. A roller coaster that takes us on a journey where we see death, sickness, betrayal, war, and above all, corruption. This game's story is way more complex and intricate than people give it credit for. It's a far cry, get it, from the other games in this series that have more linear plot structures and simpler themes, while this game is not afraid to show you events that could happen in our world. It's also rooted and down to earth in how it's told, and like I was saying before about immersion, really immersed me in the game. Like I was actually Marty myself, going around committing all these atrocities against my will, just to kill some guy who was still better than the people I was helping along the way. Can't stress enough just how brilliant this story is. It's a huge part of why I consider Far Cry 2 to be the best in the series. This game was a journey from start to end, all the way from the gunplay, which is incredibly fun and responsive, from the music, which is actually dynamic based on what situation you are in, and it all sounds great, it fits the setting of the game. From its brilliant story that captivated me to the end and made me want to see more, from the funny shenanigans like these. Wow, okay then, guess I'm not driving anymore.
Perfect, why not? You want a job?
Yeah, that's one of the things about the PC version of this game. If you play it at any frame rate over 60, the physics will start to bug out and characters will jump up and down, and their heads will start to shake like they just ate a bunch of candy or something, which leads to funny stuff like this.
Stop there. You know the drill, no weapons. No weapons. Come on, arms up. I'll need your guns and all, man. You know, no weapons. Right. I need your, you know the drill. You know the drill, no weapons. Right. Hand over the hat. I'll need your guns and all, man.
It ain't an Ubisoft game without some kind of glitch, right? I still played the entire game with 165 FPS just fine though, but if you want a more consistent experience, then I recommend capping the frame rate to 60. I didn't really get to mention it before, but this game actually has DLC in the form of the Fortune Pack, which gives you access to 3 really powerful weapons, and those are the Craftsman Shotgun, Silent Shotgun, and the Crossbow, with the Crossbow being the best out of these, due to the fact that it makes missions where you have to kill someone in a moving vehicle much easier. Keyword, much easier. This would also be a good time to point out that unlike every other game in the series, if you use guns for too long, they will start to jam. If you use them for even longer than that, they will explode in your hand and you'll be forced to switch to another weapon. It makes each encounter more tense, and you need to think about how you will tackle each mission. Personally, I always go to the gun shop to get full durability weapons before the next mission, which does mean a little bit more driving, but like I said before, I don't mind as I find that driving to be fun, and it ensures I don't have problems with my guns later down the road. That's also why I said before that driving in this game doesn't feel as monotonous as people say it is, because they do a lot in actually engaging in that driving, such as taking out outposts, going to the gun shop, and taking care of enemy patrols. This game in general is super fun, and I hope in my over 30 minutes of me talking about this game, you're able to see why I think so, and maybe have even changed your mind about it yourself, even if just a little bit. Far Cry is a great series, one of Ubisoft's best, and after having played all of them myself, I can finally understand why people find it to be so great. From the awesome open-ended gameplay that lets you think outside the box, from the focus on story in these games that leaves you wanting more of the game, and from how beautiful these games look at times, it's no wonder why a ton of people, myself included, love this series. And just like when people say Far Cry 3 or 5 or 6 or even New Dawn is your favorite, for me, Far Cry 2 is my personal favorite. I hope that after having watched this video, you have a better understanding as to why I think so, and have even come to understand me more when it comes to what I want in not only a Far Cry game, but in a video game in general. With Far Cry 7 on the horizon, I am curious to see what else this series has in store for all of us next. With all that being said, thank you guys for your time, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. But before I go, I have something to ask you fellow Far Cry fans. Why the hell did everyone pick a meetup?